Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Walk Beside Me podcast. My name is Brooklyn Bird, and we are talking today and every day about how the gospel of Jesus Christ applies to parenting. Thank you all so much for being here today. I am really excited to talk about one of the most important topics in the gospel, in life, and especially in parenting, and that is the topic of fear and replacing fear with faith. Like a lot of other concepts I talk about, this one seems basic at first glance, something you've heard a million times, but I guarantee this is a concept that we are not taking to heart. And in fact, this idea and the way that Jesus Christ teaches it is very countercultural. It is very counter to the way that most people view parenting and the way that we look at children, the way that we look at raising children. I want to talk about fear today because I've had a couple of experiences recently that have really shown me the power of getting rid of fear in my life. I haven't always been a fearless person. I haven't always been fearless about parenting. In fact, before I was a parent, I was really scared of it. I wondered how I could possibly be a good parent when there were other people that I thought were so amazing and yet their children still struggled, and that gave me a lot of fear. I was worried that there was no way I was going to do it perfectly. I have always been a person that's pretty perfectionist about things, and the fact that parenting seemed like something that was impossible to do perfectly really scared me at the time. I've since realized that actually nothing in life is supposed to go perfectly. The whole point of life is to make mistakes. The point of our children existing in this world is for them to make mistakes and learn from them. And the same thing goes for me as a parent. Because of this realization and a lot of other principles I'm going to talk about today, I truly see myself as a fearless parent. And when I recognize fear coming up in my mind, I'm really quick to observe it and cast it out. And that gives me so much peace every single day. I'm going to start by sharing these two experiences that I had that were such sweet moments with Brea, and I think they were what they were because I was free of fear in the moment, even though it would have been very easy to feel fear in these moments. The very first experience happened shortly after we moved here to Florida. We went to a splash pad that was by the beach, super fun, and we didn't realize this, but there was also a playground by the splash pad. We didn't even bring Brea's shoes because we thought we were just going to be playing in the water. It was just me and Brea. We played in the splash pad for a little while, but then Brea really wanted to go on the playground, and I was down to follow her there, but the ground was really, really hot and there wasn't water over there, so she couldn't really run around the way she wanted to. And she started getting really upset. She was frustrated that she couldn't play on the playground without it being hot, and yet she didn't want me to take her back to the splash pad. Every time I tried to direct her back to the splash pad, she was unhappy with that idea. She insisted that we stay at the playground. All the while, she was in immense pain and kind of throwing her body on the ground in frustration that things weren't going the way that she wanted them to. The interesting thing about moving to the South is that the culture here is a little bit different than it was in California. It did seem like there were more parents in California that maybe see parenting the way that I do than there are in the South. There are some really amazing things about the culture here in the South, or things that aren't good or bad, but just unique and cool. Teaching your child to say ma'am and sir is kind of cute and endearing, and as long as we're giving reciprocal respect to children, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. But I have observed a little bit more traditional behaviorist parenting strategies being used, and I definitely saw that at the splash pad this day. If other children were getting upset, their parents were really quick to shut it down and make sure the child knew that behavior is not acceptable in public. I don't judge those parents. I also don't know the full context of everything I saw, but seeing that parenting style so commonplace, I did feel tempted to be more self-conscious of my parenting style and more self-conscious of what other parents might be thinking in this moment when Brea was refusing to go back to the splash pad and wanting to be on the playground, even though it didn't really make sense for her to, since she didn't have shoes on. For that reason, I was very conscious of the fact that people might be watching me, and I did actually observe people staring at me, and even other kids at the playground staring, probably thinking, whoa, this kid's going crazy. What's the mom gonna do? It would have been very easy in that moment to feel fear about what other people thought of me as a parent, and to tell myself, okay, I need to show Brea who's boss. I need to prove to these other parents that I'm in control of the situation and that I'm a good parent. But it was really cool because I actually felt very free of those thoughts. I saw them flash into my head because they are conditioned thoughts that arise into my mind, but I was able to just watch them appear and then tell them, move along. I don't need you right now. I don't need these thoughts. They're not going to serve me. And instead, I knelt down by Brea. I made sure she knew that I was happy to pick her up when she wanted to be picked up. And she cried for probably, it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes. Really not a long time at all. It did feel a little bit long because I was conscious of people staring at us, but I really wasn't worried about it. And it was almost this transcendental experience where I felt so above the world, and not in a way like, oh, I'm better than all these people here, but I just felt so disconnected from fear, from consciousness of what other people are thinking. And I felt so in tune with who I want to be as a parent, the way I want to treat my child, no matter how she's treating me, and acting the way that I think Jesus would in the situation, no matter how countercultural it might be, no matter how different it might be from the rest of the world. It was a beautiful experience. It was hard. It was a really hot day. I'm super pregnant, and there was a part of me that wanted to feel really sorry for myself in the situation, but I was able to remind myself I created this situation by not bringing her shoes, and it's my job to just be here for her and help her figure this out. Eventually, after those 2 minutes of crying, she came into my arms and let me hold her, and I took her back to the splash pad, and then that was the end of it. I didn't have to say much. I didn't have to threaten her or punish her or anything. I just had to give her a little bit of space to let out her emotions, and then she figured it out on her own, and she was able to calm herself down. And I felt so much compassion for her, and also so happy with how it went, even though it was a really hard experience. And there were so many things that I could have interpreted about that situation to be bad or afraid of, whether that's what other people thought, or I could have also been afraid that Brea was being rebellious and that she was being defiant and that I needed to show her who's boss. I could have been afraid that if I don't teach her to shut down these emotions, she's gonna grow up to become soft or something like that. And I really just felt no fear. What could have been a really hard experience for me and Brea, something that fragmented our relationship a little bit, was extremely connecting for me and only increased my love for her. Every parent deserves to feel that, and we can have these kind of experiences. Literally any experience, no matter how challenging, can be a connecting, uplifting, empowering one if we choose to view it without fear and with faith instead. One other experience that I had recently was somewhat similar. We are visiting a family in Texas right now, and this past Sunday we were leaving church, and as we were trying to head out the door, Brea was refusing to go outside the church door. She really didn't want to until this other family walked through the doors. And then as soon as that family walked through, she chased after them. We were kind of confused. We kind of were like, wait, Brea, stay with us. And then she got really upset that we weren't letting her chase after this family. It was kind of confusing. We were like, what is going on? And again, it was really hot. It's in Texas. It's humid. It's hot. Everyone wanted to get in the car and just head home from church. Meanwhile, Brea was trying to run across the parking lot and follow this family. I picked her up to take her to the car, but she just kept pointing after them and kept crying, even though it would have been really easy for me, again, to worry about what people think, to think, okay, I just need to put her in her car seat. Everyone else is waiting on us. I don't want to inconvenience anyone. I don't want to look like a bad pushover parent right now. I decided there's something she really cares about, and if we can figure it out, then we're going to resolve this situation. So I put her back on the ground and I let her show me what she wanted. She started chasing after them again. I followed her and she kept saying, Daddy, Daddy. And I was confused because my husband, her dad, was right with us. So I didn't know why she would think her dad was with them. And then I realized that she was saying something else. She was saying something like, Daddy present, Daddy present. And suddenly it clicked for me. In nursery that day, she and all the other nursery kids had made little presents for their dads for Father's Day. It was just a card with the little handprint on it. But she had seen this other family walk away with a card, just like the one that she made for her dad. And she thought that they had taken her dad's card. And she was really distressed about it. Once I figured that out, I got on her level and I said, hey, do you think they took Dad's card? And she's like, yeah. And she was so upset. She was so sad. And then I said, hey, guess what? We still have Dad's card. I asked my husband to pull his out, and he pulled it out and showed her. Relief flooded over her face. She jumped into my arms, and then we went to the car. And there was no battle. If I had viewed her as being defiant or unreasonable, I might have easily totally bulldozed over the things she was concerned about, shoved her in the car, and left church thinking, man, she has to make things so difficult. Why does this have to be so hard? Whereas actually, because I had no fears about her being a bad person or about what other people thought, I was able to take the time to see that Brea was not trying to make us miserable. In fact, she was trying to give her dad a sweet gift that she had made for him, and she was trying to make our lives better. Again, this experience showed me the power of ridding yourself of fear, especially in these really hard moments with our kids. If you can get rid of the fears of what other people think and your fear of needing to be in control or needing to teach your child a lesson or needing to show your child who's boss, we can actually get so much farther in seeing them for who they really are, really connecting with them, and being the kind of parent that it feels good to be. The scriptures tell us over and over and over again not to fear. That is one of the most repeated phrases in scriptures. I'm going to read a few scriptures that talk about this, but I'm not reading even all of them. I'm going to read these scriptures and then I'm going to talk about 5 common parenting fears and how we can use scripture and truth to turn these fears into faith, which is going to make our days with our children so much happier, more joyful, more lighthearted, less stressful, and really full of lots of learning and growth, both for our kids and for us. So here are just a few scriptures telling us that we don't need fear in our parenting. Genesis 26:24, fear not, for I am with thee, and will bless thee. Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. 2 Kings 6:16, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. 2 Timothy 1:7, my favorite verse of all time. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. Doctrine and Covenants 67:10, strip yourselves from fears. Doctrine and Covenants 68:6, be of good cheer and do not fear, for I the Lord am with you and will stand by you. What all of these scriptures show me is that if we are feeling fear, we are not in tune with the Spirit. It says in 2 Timothy 1:7 that God does not give us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So if we are feeling fear, we're not in a godly place. We're not going to act in ways that God would act. We're not going to make choices that Christ would have us choose. And even if we're doing the right thing, we're not going to be doing it with real intent. We're going to be doing it from a place of fear, which is still unhelpful. Sometimes we stay in fear because we have this fear that if I stop fearing, then something bad might happen that I could have prevented if I was more fearful and anxious about the situation. So we choose to keep fearing out of fear, which is just funny. We need to trust that when God tells us we don't need to fear and that we shouldn't fear and that fear is not helpful for us, that that's true. And no matter what happens, even if there's an outcome that we with our mortal minds don't like or don't agree with, living without fear is still the better way because God tells us it is. I do want to clarify that living without fear doesn't mean that you're going to do things like let your toddler swim in the pool by themselves because you're just fearless and you have ultimate faith that they're not going to drown. You can still set up safe boundaries for your children, but not doing it from a place of fear, simply doing it from a place of knowledge. When I don't let Brea go in the pool by herself, it's not because I'm afraid of what will happen if she does. It's because I know that there's a very strong likelihood that she could drown if I'm not with her when she's in the pool. When I make that decision, it doesn't feel like it's coming from a place of fear. It comes from a place of true knowledge of a very likely outcome. Whereas there are other times when we don't have knowledge of a certain outcome, but we just fear it. When that knowledge is absent, that's when we're living in fear. When we are afraid of what people think, even though we have no way of knowing what actually goes on in their heads, that's living in a place of fear. When we can't really read our children's hearts and minds, so we instead decide to fear that they are being rebellious or defiant, and that's what's going on in their heart and mind. That's a place of fear. That's not a place of knowledge. You can't say, I know that my child is intentionally being defiant right now. You don't know that, and you can never know that. When we choose a narrative that's scary and that condemns our child, that's when we're living in a place of fear. So how do we release fear? Part of it is just giving ourselves permission to believe that we don't ever need to fear. Like I said, some of us are hanging on to fear because we think it's going to be helpful. We think that, oh, I'm being righteous by being afraid of this circumstance and helping my child in some way by being afraid for all the negative outcomes that could happen in their life. However, we need to give ourselves permission to trust that when God says we don't need to fear, we don't need to fear. So that's the first step, is just giving yourself permission to let go of it. Really believing that it's going to be okay if you let go of your fear. Even if your life or your child's life doesn't turn out the way that you hope it will, letting go of fear is the best way to function. Another way we can let go of fear is by preparing ourselves with with scriptural verses, thoughts, mantras, truths to counter our fears when they arise. And that's what I want to do for the rest of this episode, is talk about 5 common fears in parenting, and then talk about the spiritual reasons that these fears are really unjustified in eternity, and also offer you some mantras and some scriptures that will help you cast out these fears when they arise for you. This preparation can help you cast out fear, because in Doctrine and Covenants 38:30 it says, "If ye are prepared, ye shall not fear." The first fear I've talked about a lot already, especially with the 2 stories I shared, but that fear is fear of what other people think. We see this fear show up when people change how they discipline their children in public in order to avoid looking too soft, or perhaps even to avoid looking too harsh. We care more about what other people think than treating our children the way that we actually want to treat them. Another way it shows up is we think that we need to control our child, because if we don't, then people are going to think that we're a bad parent, that we're not doing our job, that we're slacking off. There are lots of verses in the scriptures that talk about letting go of fear of what people think, and reasons that we don't need to fear what other people think, and it's never a helpful thing to do. One that I really love is Luke 6:26. In this verse, Jesus says, "Woe unto you when all men shall speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets." In other words, our goal should not be for everyone to think we're awesome, or everyone to think that we're good parents, for everyone to speak well of us. Jesus even warns us that that's actually not a good sign if everyone speaks well of us. And this makes sense, because if we're following Christ, we're probably going to get some haters. Jesus was perfect. He was the most perfect being on this earth. He performed absolutely perfectly, and yet he had lots of haters. And he still has lots of haters to this day. So who are we to expect other people to think we're awesome, for everyone to like us, when even Jesus couldn't and didn't even try to get everyone to like him and the way that he did things? A few more verses. Psalm 56:4, "In God I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do to me." Isaiah 51:7, "Fear ye not the reproach of men, neither be ye afraid of their revilings." Psalm 56:4, "In God I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me." Moroni 8:16, "I fear not what man can do, for perfect love casteth out all fear." Psalm 27:1, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" Proverbs 29:25, "The fear of man bringeth a snare, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe." When I read that last verse in Proverbs 29:25, it really takes me back to that experience with Brea at the splash pad. If I had been afraid of what everyone around me was thinking of me, and perhaps worried that people were thinking I was being a pushover or not laying down the law strong enough for my toddler, I would have acted in ways that weren't intentional, but that were just trying to appease the opinions of everyone around me. But I put my trust in God and doing things the way that I think Christ would, and I felt safe, even though I was in the middle of a playground surrounded by a bunch of people possibly judging me for letting my toddler cry in public for 2 minutes. I felt safe in that moment. I felt connected to my daughter, and I felt connected to my Savior. Some mantras that I repeat to myself when I start to see fear creeping in, especially fear of what other people think. I say, I don't have to do things the world's way. I remind myself that Jesus was judged too, and I also remind myself that people are allowed to think whatever they want to think. It's not their job to like me. It's not their job to approve of my parenting, and it's not my job to parent in a way that they approve of or to get anyone else's approval. By giving others the freedom to think whatever they want and not let it affect me, I've found so much more peace in my parenting than I would have otherwise. The next common parenting fear is fear of the child's emotions. This mostly applies to what we might call big emotions, or what might have been called in the past negative emotions. This fear shows up in a myriad of ways. It can be something as simple as when our child starts crying, rushing to say something like, "Oh, don't be sad, you don't need to be sad," jumping to tell them immediately why they shouldn't be feeling what they're feeling. It also shows up in how we sometimes distract our child instead of letting them cry or express their frustration. We feel the need to immediately redirect them to, "Oh, come play this puzzle with me," or, "Oh, do you want a snack?" Not letting them experience the emotion and figure it out for themselves. This also happens when our child is struggling with a task. Let's say they're trying to figure out a puzzle, and as soon as we hear them express any amount of frustration, we say, "Oh, do you want my help? Do you want me to help?" This comes from a place of not being comfortable with seeing our child be uncomfortable. We want to make sure they're happy and peaceful all the time, whereas it's actually a very normal part of the human experience to struggle a little bit, and it's very okay for our child to feel the struggle and to see that they're capable of overcoming the struggle on their own. If we want to parent in a godly way, we should be looking to God's example And it's clear that God is not afraid of emotion. I've said this before and I'll say this again, but God actually asks us to cry unto him. He invites us to express our emotions. And Jesus Christ himself even wept when he saw Mary and Martha mourning the loss of their brother. God also tells us to mourn with those that mourn. He tells us to be with emotion, not shut it down. He doesn't say, tell those that mourn not to be sad. He tells us to understand those who are mourning. As humans, we view emotions as good and bad, and we probably view the quote-unquote bad emotions as bad because they can sometimes be a little bit inconvenient. They might slow us down a little bit, or they can make us uncomfortable because we never learned to sit with these emotions and observe them and learn from them and let them pass within us. We learned to just shut them down when we were children. But there's actually nothing objectively wrong with an emotion. If we can stop feeling afraid of the emotion, that's going to teach our child that they don't need to be afraid of the emotion either. It's going to help them learn from their emotions and get over them more fully than they would if they were being taught to shut them down out of fear of them. In fact, fearing emotions only makes them worse, and it exacerbates the whole experience. If our child is sad and we come at them with this attitude of, oh no, don't be sad, don't be sad, don't be sad, it's because we parents are afraid that we won't be able to handle the emotion. We are afraid that the emotion is going to make us uncomfortable. But if we can just sit with our child, let them be sad, be that calm presence that is unafraid of the emotion, it teaches them that there's nothing to be afraid of and that they are capable of handling that emotion. Some mantras I use to remind myself not to be afraid of big emotions. I just tell myself, she's allowed to feel scared. She's allowed to feel sad. She's allowed to feel mad. Allowing her to feel whatever she's going to feel helps me stay so calm in every moment of big emotions, and she gets that calm place a lot faster too. Another mantra I really like is from Tessa Romero, one of my favorite parenting influencers. She talks about how when her kids are having a hard moment, she reminds herself, I just need to last one more minute than my kid. This actually makes it seem so simple. If I can just last one more minute than my kid, then I've succeeded. And also, I totally should be able to last one more minute than my kid. If my toddler can keep up this tantrum for 5 minutes, of course, I, as the adult in the situation, can stay calm for 6 minutes. I love that. Really practical and actionable advice that she gives. The third fear is fear of disobedience or rejection. This fear shows up when we are afraid of holding a boundary or giving an instruction because we are afraid that our child isn't going to comply. So we hold the boundary in a tentative way, or we give an instruction in a pleading, desperate way because we already have this fear that our child is going to say no. It also shows up when we react with immediate anger when a child questions our instruction. We see questions and delayed obedience as rebellious or defiant, and so we react to it. We feel panicked when a toddler says no, and we push harder to regain control. We use threats or bribes out of desperation to get instant compliance. And on a larger scale, we also fear our children questioning or rejecting our faith. If you have a teenager or an adult child who is questioning the faith that you raised them with, a fear of rejection is going to make it more personal to you. It's going to make it feel like the child is rejecting you. This fear isn't very helpful because if our faith is really powerful and it's something worth believing in, then it should drive us to have faith in our child and have faith in God that He is bigger than their doubts, He is bigger than their questions, and the truth is truth. The vast majority of children who question their parents' faith, based on my own experience of also questioning my own faith at times, are questioning it because they're really seeking for the truth and they really want to make sure that they are believing in something because it's true and not just because their parents told them that they should believe in it. If we can believe that about our kids and stop taking their questions personally, then we give them the space to find the truth. And if your belief system is really true, then you should have absolute faith that that's what they're going to land on eventually. There's lots of evidence in the scriptures that God isn't afraid of His children rejecting truth. Obviously, He wants them to accept truth, but He doesn't fear them asking questions. In James 1:5, it says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not. In other words, when we ask questions, God doesn't rebuke us. There's no such thing as a stupid question to God. He's always happy to answer our questions. I experienced this firsthand when in my freshman year of college, I had lots of questions about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the faith that I grew up in. I had learned some things about the church's history that was new information that really rocked my world and made me question everything that I had learned before, even the truth of the Book of Mormon, which was something that I had previously prayed about, and I had previously thought that I had a spiritual experience confirming its truth to me. At the time, I questioned that spiritual experience, and and I wanted to pray again and get a confirmation. And I was a little afraid to, because I imagined God being annoyed with me. If it was true, I imagined him being like, I already told you, why are you asking again? But I prayed about it anyways. I told God, I really want to make sure I know this is true before I go serve a mission for my church. He didn't respond the way I expected him to. He didn't respond with frustration or annoyance or, come on, I already told you. All I felt was that he was immensely proud of me for asking questions and being sincere. That was the message I got from him that night, was that he was so glad I was asking. At that time, that wasn't quite the answer I was expecting or hoping for. It. He didn't tell me the Book of Mormon's true, but he told me, I'm so glad you're asking. And because of the way that God responded to me in that moment, I was able to keep asking and keep studying and keep searching. And eventually I did regain my testimony that the Book of Mormon is true and that it's the Word of God. I'm so grateful to God as a parent for giving me that space and allowing me to ask questions, because that's what led me to the even deeper testimony that I have now, a testimony that's much deeper than it would have been if he had been a parent who was afraid of me asking questions and was afraid of me being disobedient and rejecting truth. If he had said, how dare you ask this question, I don't think that would have helped my relationship with God. Maybe I would have carried on hoping the Book of Mormon was true, but his response of patience and love and appreciation for my asking a question and for my wanting to make sure that I was on the right path is what gave me space to really know that I was on the right path. We also don't need to fear rejection or disobedience, because our children making mistakes and experiencing hardship has been God's plan from the beginning. It has been since Adam and Eve fell from the Garden of Eden. It's the point of life. And also the point of life is to experience redemption through Jesus Christ. And without our mistakes and shortcomings, we wouldn't have any reason to connect with Jesus Christ. So every time our children make a mistake, instead of seeing it as the end of the world or seeing it as character defining for them, we can see it as this is another opportunity for them to connect with Jesus Christ. And this is an opportunity for me to connect with Jesus Christ, to pray for them, to pray that his grace and his love will cover them. And really, at the end of the day, we don't want, and I don't think God wants, just obedient children. We want children who are going to choose the right because they know internally that it's right. We don't want them to do the right thing just because it's what their parents told them to do. I don't want my kids to do anything just because I'm the authority and I told them to do it. In fact, I would rather my children intentionally make a mistake than only do the right thing because they're scared of how I'm going to react, or they're scared of hurting my feelings, or they're scared of being seen as a disobedient child. I can share some mantras that keep me in this mindset on the day-to-day. One is that when I see Brea do something contrary to what I told her to, I tell myself, this is just agency. This is just agency at work. It's not defiance. It's just agency. I also remind myself, we can figure this out. We have all the time in the world. We have our whole lives. I can ask again. I can find a new way to ask. I can give her some space and try asking in later when it's better time for her. There's actually no rush to get immediate compliance. I also remind myself learning takes time, and I remind myself this is just a misunderstanding. If she's not following an instruction that I'm giving her, it's because she doesn't yet understand why that instruction is important. And it's my job as a parent to help her see that. So I never see her failure to immediately obey as disobedience or defiance. There's nothing to defy. There's just a teacher here wanting to teach. I'm not her boss. I don't even really see myself as in charge of her. I just see myself as a teacher whose job it is to help her understand how to navigate this world. A related fear, this is fear number 4, is fear of the child's inner badness. This shows up when we see a child's behavior as manipulative, controlling, or any other label that we commonly use with children. I can think of so many phrases related to parenting that are thrown around as if they are gospel, that are really fear-driven notions about how parenting works and how children work. Whenever you notice yourself or someone else using words that we only use to describe a child's behavior, and I'll give several examples of them in just a second here, I want you to question those words and question if they're coming from a place of fear or power, love, and a sound mind. I guarantee that the vast majority of them are coming from a place of fear, and they're not truthful. They are words that carry lots of negative stories about children and why children do things that we need to reject if we want to start living in truth and without fear. I'm going to list a few things that are commonly said about children. First, delayed obedience is disobedience. This phrase is quite silly. If I ask my husband to help me with the dishes and he said, okay, give me 5 minutes to finish up this work project, it would be totally ridiculous for me to get upset with him and say, no, you need to drop everything to help me right now, or else you don't love me, or else you don't respect me. Yeah, that's how we treat our children if they they don't put down whatever they're working on right in the moment, whether that's playing a game or creating art or reading a book, if they don't put it down immediately to do what we want when we ask for it, we act like that's so disrespectful. Whereas in any other relationship, it would be extremely unhealthy to expect the other person to do what you say as soon as you say it. And also, how many times a day do our children ask for help with things and we tell them, okay, just wait 5 minutes, I'm gonna finish the dishes, or okay, just wait 1 minute, I need to finish changing your brother's diaper. And if our child ever gets impatient with us, we act like they're being so unreasonable. It's very much a double standard where we expect the child to do what we want as soon as we ask for it, and yet we also expect the child to be extremely patient with us and the things that we think are so important that we need to finish before we help them with what they want. Okay, some more phrases that show this fear of a child's inner badness. The idea that children shouldn't talk back. What does talking back even mean? Does that mean asking a question? Again, this just shows that we expect children to do what we say without asking any questions, without ever disagreeing. It doesn't strike me as a healthy way to operate with any other human being. The saying, don't let them walk all over you, you need to show them who's boss. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. You have to nip that behavior in the bud. Don't let them manipulate you. You don't want them to grow up soft. This is what's wrong with this generation or kids nowadays. The notion of coddling our children, that they can be coddled if we love them too much. Saying they're just doing that to push your buttons. Calling children entitled. Even the word tantrum has so many negative connotations, and I prefer to use words that we would use with other humans too. Perhaps expressing emotions or crying. The idea of the terrible twos. The idea of three-nagers and people saying just wait until ... wait until your child's a teenager. All of this language that we use to talk about children's behavior and development shows a fear of children being innately bad. And it's funny because when we view children as manipulative and we fear that they're trying to pull one over on us, or if we give them an inch, they'll take a mile, we just let fear manipulate us instead. We don't need to fear our child's inner badness because we know that every single human on this earth is innately good. Every single person on this earth chose to follow Jesus Christ in their premortal life. We're also all children of God, who is all things good. So really, outward behaviors, outward attitudes, our children's tone of voice, whatever we don't like that they're doing in the moment, is just the very outside of the onion. Think about Shrek and how ogres are like onions. Children are like onions too. That outward layer of behavior is not who they are innately. It's just a reflection of some kind of misunderstanding, some lack of development, some lack of skill, and we just need to figure out what the root cause of that behavior is and help them address that rather than labeling them as bad or judging them by this behavior that they're showing on the outside. A mantra that I like to think of here when Brea is acting in a way that I feel tempted to label as defiant or manipulative, I ask myself, if I were acting the way that she's acting, why would I be doing this? Usually, if I ask myself that question, I'm able to figure it out, and then we're able to resolve the issue in a way that's connecting for both of us, rather than me trying to force her to act a certain way to stamp the badness out of her, the badness that doesn't even exist. The final fear I want to talk about, this is fear number 5, is fear of messing up the child. I see this show up a lot with people who talk about gentle parenting. There are lots of things I like about gentle parenting, but at the same time, I see a lot of fear of causing emotional trauma to the child, which puts the parent in this place of fear. And when we're acting in a place of fear, that itself is actually traumatic for the child. When the parent is acting fearfully, the child sees the world as a place to be feared, and the child even sees himself as someone to be feared because the parent is so afraid of messing up the child. This shows up when we feel crushed by guilt after yelling or making a mistake, or also just needing a step-by-step guide to navigate every single type of interaction. I see this so much online where there will be a positive parenting post and then the comment section is full of, okay, well, what if you're a single mom with 4 kids and your 3rd child is taking a bath while your 4th child is throwing toys into the bath, getting into super specific details of what's going on in their family and expecting there to be a one-size-fits-all way to address the situation. This shows a fear of doing the wrong thing with our children and therefore messing them up in some way, whether that's causing emotional trauma or leading the child to become someone or something that we don't want them to become. This used to be a big fear for me because, like I talked about, I have been a perfectionist for most of my life. Yet I have been able to let go of this fear because I know I have put more trust in Jesus Christ and his redemption than myself. I make lots of mistakes every day with Brea. There are lots of times when I realize I could have done something better. But every time that happens, I just say a prayer and I say, hey God, I think I made a mistake here. Please heal what I did. Please cover my mistakes and ultimately make my relationship with Brea perfect in Christ. And then I just trust, and I give myself permission to trust that he's working it out and he's going to direct me to do better in the future. And he's also going to give us experiences and opportunities to make up for whatever damage I might have caused in the past. If God trusts us with his children, then we need to trust ourselves too. He is all-knowing. He is all-powerful. He could have raised his children in any other number of ways, but he chose this way. He chose you for your child. And if he's all-knowing and all things have been done in the wisdom of him who knoweth all things, then you can trust yourself with your child too. We also need to remember that we are not the Savior. Jesus Christ is. It's not our job to save our children. It's our job to give them as many opportunities as we can to be saved by Jesus Christ. One more specific fear of messing up the child is the fear of spoiling the child. If this is a fear for you, just remember this verse. In Doctrine and Covenants, it says, fear not to do good, my sons, for whatsoever ye sow, that shall ye also reap. Therefore, if ye sow good, ye shall also reap good for your reward. In other words, we should not be afraid of doing good things for our children. We can never give them too much love, and the more good we do for them, the more we serve them and love them, the more that's going to return back to us. I also have a podcast episode about spoiling specifically. I will link in the show notes if that's something you want to think more about. A mantra I use to remind myself that I don't need to be afraid of messing up my children is simply that Christ can perfect anything. Anytime I make a mistake, I remind myself that this is an opportunity for Jesus Christ to step in and help me out. That gives me so much peace every time I make a mistake. I know that it's not all on me and that it's actually an opportunity for Jesus Christ to come and fill in the gaps of where I'm falling short. I want to close by offering to you a journaling exercise to help you release some of these fears. If you, like me, are trying to live a fear-free, fearless parenting experience, which I highly recommend because the times I'm able to achieve it are amazing, I would recommend trying out this exercise. I did this just yesterday when I was struggling with a few things emotionally, mentally, as I make the transition from working part-time to, for the foreseeable future, being a full-time stay-at-home mom. One thing I was feeling yesterday as the day felt different and a lot longer than I was used to was boredom. And I asked myself in my journal, what is my fear underlying the boredom? And there were two fears that I identified. One was that it's always going to be like this. Boredom feels worse when you fear that that's what you're always going to be feeling all the time. The other one was that I wasn't living my life to the fullest. Again, my boredom felt even worse when I added to it the story of I should be doing more, I should be accomplishing more. I wrote in my journal how I wanted to replace that with faith. I wrote down the truths that can cast out those fears. One was that everything is temporary, even the feeling of boredom. This is just a phase of me learning how to be a full-time stay-at-home mom. Life is just going to keep getting better because it always does, as long as I keep learning. Another truth that I wrote down was that it's good to learn how to experience and sit with boredom. That's something that we miss out on a lot in this modern life with cell phones and technology, and it's something that I want my kids to learn how to do too. So feeling a little boredom is actually a good opportunity for me to learn how to respond effectively to that feeling. Finally, I wrote down the truth that there are things I can do within my power to prove to myself that these fears are unfounded. I wrote down a list of all the many fun screen-free hobbies I want to spend my time doing. I wrote down a list of all those hobbies that I can work on while taking care of Brea. And immediately my boredom was gone and I was feeling so happy and grateful to be in this season of my life. So that journaling exercise is ask yourself the question, what is my fear underlying X? Whatever negative emotion or negative experience you're dwelling on. Then the next question is, how can I replace this with faith? Then you're going to write down all the truths, all the reasons that you don't have to fear. I know that when we let go of fear and choose faith instead, we're choosing God and we're choosing his spirit rather than choosing to follow Satan. At the end of the day, all fears come from Satan because God has told us that his spirit is not one of fear. So when we choose faith instead, even in the circumstances where it feels impossible or totally unreasonable, totally irrational to choose faith instead of fear, that's actually the times when we give God the biggest space and opportunity to bless us and bring miracles into our lives. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to or follow the podcast, leave a review and rating, and share an episode that you love with a friend. And with that, I will sign off and I will talk to you all next week.